Our next speaker is the leader of one of the newest luxury real estate brands to enter the North American marketplace. 4 years ago, this top agent turned broker manager took on the role of growing and operating the well-established European real estate company Engel Volkers within the Americas. To date, Engel Volkers operates in 35 countries with nearly 700 premium locations. Oh girl, me too. I get around. 155 of which are located throughout Canada, the US, and the Caribbean. Under his leadership, they're focused on providing their advisors and clients with the highest level of service. He's recognized as one of the top 200 most powerful people in residential real estate and as an Inman real estate influencer. I don't know about you, but I'm so turned on right now. Please welcome to the stage. We shop at the same store. It's so exciting. We're twinsies today. The president and CEO of Engel Volkers Americas, Anthony Hitt.
Good morning, everyone. I will tell you, I want to thank Jeff very quickly for inviting me and everyone at NAGLREP for inviting me to contribute this morning. I will tell you, standing on the stage this morning, at this time in my life with this particular presentation as the CEO of a major real estate brand here in the United States means an awful lot to me, and I think you will see why as I go through this, this presentation. I got to breathe just a little bit. That being said, my presentation today is the power of three. And I think we've always heard that saying, the good things come in threes. And I know for me, in my life, that has certainly been the case. There's also an idea that I have that most of us can look back over our lives and we can take a look at what we've learned, and we can probably distill it down into three lessons or three principles that we've learned that continue to guide our lives on a regular basis. And so this morning what I'm going to do is I'm going to share those three principles with you, the principles that have done relatively well for me so far in my life. My presentation this morning is divided into, keeping with my theme of threes, into three acts. The first act is me growing up as a boy in a small town in central Missouri. The second act is being the #1 real estate agent for Sotheby's International Realty turned broker. And then the third act is becoming the CEO of Engel Volkers. And for you who might not be aware of us yet, Engel Volkers is a 40-year-old luxury real estate brand from Hamburg, Germany, that's been introducing itself to the market over the last couple of years. But let's start where it all begins for me, and this is in Moberly, Missouri. How many of you have ever been to Moberly, Missouri? Oh my gosh, right here on the front row. I didn't expect that.
Grew up in Kirkwood.
Kirkwood, Mo, okay, absolutely, another Missouri person. Well, then you'll appreciate this. How many of you have ever heard of Moberly, Missouri other than just now? Okay, a couple of you, okay, a couple of you. Well, Moberly, Missouri, when I was growing up there, was a town of about 13,000. Interestingly, it's still a town of about 13,000. Back when I was growing up, it was more of a railroad community and a farming community. Today, it's really more of a bedroom community for the larger Columbia, Missouri, which is a university town. It's about halfway between St. Louis, Missouri, and Kansas City. My parents, my mother. Oh, there we go. Oh. So, my mother, she was a secretary for the owner of a grocery store chain. My father spent his entire career working for the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. He was managing a tire shop that he started right outside of, or right after he left college. And Moberly is probably exactly what most of us would expect if we're looking about a rural town back at the time I was growing up. Pretty idealistic. At least that's what we would probably think if you were like everyone else. It was definitely a place that you would maybe think of if you were looking at Leave It to Beaver or Mayberry back in the day. Kind of just a good, nostalgic, good old days kind of a city. However, if you weren't like everyone else, things could be a little bit different. There's possibly what I would call maybe a culture of fear. To say that some people in my hometown and in Missouri were not open-minded would be a gross understatement. As a matter of fact, right before I went to middle school, which is what, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, right before I entered the middle school I went to, a young boy was actually hung in the boys' bathroom, for being the only kid that was black in the community. Now I go fast forward, I go to high school. It's my sophomore year in high school, and a young man is brutally murdered in the community next to me because he supposedly hit on another young man. This is years before Matthew Shepard was ever born. This is long before the term hate crime ever came into existence. So you can say that there was definitely a culture of fear if you weren't like everyone else. Which brings me to my very first of my life lessons, and that is channeling fear into drive. Fear can be a very, very powerful emotion. It can be paralyzing, or it can be something that gives you, that empowers you to do good things. For me to tell you that I spent a lot of my formative years growing up in fear would be absolutely true, even though I don't think I necessarily realized it. I had a fear of being made fun of. I had a fear of being bullied. I had a fear of being beaten up. I had a fear of letting people down because I didn't do some of the things that the other boys did so well, nearly as well. And that's the culture that I grew up in. But lucky for me, somehow, possibly because of my parents, I learned how to channel that fear into something that worked for me. I learned that a lot of my fears, a lot of my imagination of what things could, how bad things could be, didn't turn out to be true. All these horrible things that I thought would happen didn't actually happen. Or if they did happen, they weren't nearly as bad as I suspected. And as I realized that a lot of these fears, these outcomes didn't come into play, that gave me more and more confidence to put myself in uncomfortable situations and to try new things and new experiences. And as I discovered these new experiences, and I went through these new experiences and I realized, wow, there's an incredible world out there for me, I got more and more confident, and I tried even more new things. Now, I understand that fear is also there to keep us out of harm's way, and most of the time, some of my fears did keep me out of harm's way, but ultimately, I kept forcing myself into uncomfortable situations, and I think that's one of the things that led me to being an entrepreneur. Because being an entrepreneur a lot of times is doing things that no one else has done before and being uncomfortable. And so I will tell you that as a young guy, I think I always had the entrepreneurial spirit. I remember having remember Kool-Aid stands, lemonade stands? Well, I had one of those Kool-Aid stands, or actually 4 of those Kool-Aid stands. In kind of a Tom Sawyer style, what I did is I recruited my sister and some of her friends and my friends from around the block, and we had 4 Kool-Aid stands, one on all 4 corners of the block we lived on. And I remember my big goal back at that time was to be able to cross the street so I could open more Kool-Aid stands. So the drive was always there, but I will tell you that channeling that fear into drive, that building my confidence by doing the things that scared me the most, by leaning into those things, it's probably why I become an entrepreneur. It's why I ultimately leave that small town of Moberly, Missouri, and go to St. Louis, Missouri, and then ultimately to California, here in Santa Monica, where I became a real estate agent. Number 2, focus on what's important. I think as entrepreneurs, which most of us in this room are, we have a tendency to be dreamers with just a pinch of insanity. And while you agree with that? I know we'll talk about last night. That being a pinch of insanity, and that insanity and those dreams and those little crazy voices in our head are what lead us to be extremely creative. And that creativity is good, but sometimes we're so focused on being creative, we don't focus on the most important things, the things that actually have a tendency to move us forward or take our careers to the next level. And so, a couple of people agree. My friend from Missouri, thank you. So we don't focus on what the most important things are. And it's not that we don't know what the most important things are. Usually we know exactly what we should be doing, but sometimes those crazy voices and all those dreams pull us away. So we know what to do. We know we need to focus on the big rocks. We know we need to focus on the things that are going to move us forward. And I'm going to tell you, for me as an agent, the 3 things that I focused on that seemed to help me with my success. I'm not someone typically to say, look at me, look at me, look at me. As a matter of fact, I will tell you right now, I'm very uncomfortable giving this particular presentation. But if I'm going to talk to you about me as an agent, I want to give you a couple of my numbers. I sold real estate for 9 years. In 9 years, I closed almost 450 transactions. That means I closed, on average, a transaction about every 6 days. My average sale transaction at the end of my career was just a little over $1.1 million, which means I closed about $500 million in real estate in that period of time. And I was named a lot of the top this and the top that, made the Wall Street Journal list, et cetera. So these are the things that I believe set me apart from my competition. And I think they worked for me during the 9 years that I was selling, and I think they can work for us still today. Number one, building trust. We've got to build trust with our clients. Year after year after year since I've been in this business, if I read the National Association of Realtors list about what buyers and sellers want from us, always in the top 3, at least usually the first or second, is the fact they want to hire an agent that they trust. So we've got to be the agent that they trust. How do we do that? Pretty simple, be trustworthy. Be trustworthy. If you say you're going to call somebody back in 5 minutes or 15 minutes, call them back in 5 minutes or 15 minutes. Every time we don't do what we say we're going to do, we chip away a little bit of that trust that we're building. We chip away a little bit of our credibility. I've said many times before, if you're going to keep every promise you make and only make promises you keep. I think a lot of times we have a tendency to make promises that we don't have any control over. We have to be cautious with our words. We have to be careful with our words. Another way you build trust is you put your client's best interest ahead of your own. I love what Madison said just a minute ago about be a blessing and then be blessed. I think that makes perfect sense. And I have found when you do put your client's interest ahead of your own, your dreams and your desires will come back far more than you ever possibly imagined. I'll tell you a time in my life when this was probably the most challenging. It was when the downturn happened. And I had to give good advice to my clients. And that advice usually was, don't do it right now. Don't sell right now. Don't buy right now. And it cost me almost everything, except for my reputation. And when the market started coming back, so did my business. And I will tell you that my last 3, oops, you didn't see that one, did you? My last 3 quarters in the business were my best 3 quarters in the business. As a matter of fact, the last 3 months that I sold real estate, I made more money than I did in my first 3 years selling real estate. So it absolutely works for you, but it's not always easy. The second is delivering a white glove experience, or a superior experience, whatever you want to call that. We're a luxury brand, so we say white glove, but the fact of the matter is, especially with technology and all the disruptors we keep hearing about, it's more important than ever that you create an experience for your clients. An experience that they expect from you, that they appreciate from you, and so they see the value of what you do versus just what technology can do or what all the other competitors will do. This is not nearly as hard as it sounds for some of us. It's very simple. Draw a timeline from the day that you meet your client until the time escrow closes and beyond that. And then put everything on that timeline that you know is going to happen. You're the expert. You know how this business works. You know there's going to be offers. You know there's going to be marketing. You know the sign's going to come up. You know there's going to be showings. You know there's going to be inspections and offers. You know all those things. Put them on the timeline. And then think, what would be the way that I could make this experience even more special for my clients? That's it. And when you do that, and by the way, come up with a few little rituals, a few little things that make it very personal, very much yours. So when people are doing business with you, they know they're doing business with you. Finally, my number 3 item to focus on is also my number 3 life lesson. And that's to be authentic. And I'm going to give you a little caveat here to start with. During the first years of my life, about the first half of my life, one of my biggest obstacles was not being considered a fraud. Am I doing okay? Okay, good. Was not being a fraud. You see, I was telling a lie in most of my life, and I did it for all the reasons I told you about growing up in Missouri. I was fearful that if I let people know my story, that they might not like me, or they might not do business with me, or that worse yet, it might hurt my family or my relationship with my family. But I finally learned the lesson that if you're going to be honest with people, you have to be totally honest with people. We were talking about how important that trust is. And for me, the only way to do that was to become honest with myself and not keep pretending. But for a long time I did, and I will tell you, when I stopped pretending and I started living my honest life, that's when everything changed. That's when the clouds parted. That's when all of a sudden, on a dime, my life trajectory was changed, and changed for the better. But before that happened, I pretended a lot about who I was. I would go out with friends. Well, let me just go this far. And then I met Sean. When Sean and I were first together, well, let me tell you about Sean first of all. Sean was raised a strict Southern Baptist. He was actually at Southern Baptist University in Missouri when I first met Sean. So Sean's parents are very conservative. His mother, Judy, actually looks like Barbara Bush, except she's far more conservative than the former First Lady. His father was the commander of the Pacific, a Navy commander for the Pacific Fleet of submarines. So a pretty conservative family. So when we first got together, my mouth's a little dry now. When we first got together, my fear of being outed and murdered, his strict religious upbringing and conservative family made us decide it was best if we didn't tell our story. And so for a long time, because we wanted to protect our careers, we wanted to protect our relationships with our families, we didn't tell our story. Which brings me to why this number is so important in my life. When we would first get together, because we actually rented a 2-bedroom apartment, even though we only used one and could only afford one. We actually dated women for the first couple of years that we were together. We hid who we were. But there were those 3 words that every couple should be able to say to each other, privately or publicly, in front of their families and their friends and in front of complete strangers. Those 3 magical words that we couldn't say. I love you. And so we created a code, if you will, for us to tell that to each other when other people were present. It might be that we'd work the number 3 into a conversation. So we're having lunch this afternoon late. We're going to be about 3 o'clock when we get together. I saw 3 squirrels playing in the yard. And when we were with each other and nobody was paying attention, we'd squeeze each other's hand 3 times or tap each other under the table 3 times. It was just our code to say those magical words. 20 years later, we would be married on the beach. By the way, the first day that you could be legally married in the state of California was our 20th anniversary together. And so we were married on the beach in Malibu. You can see the lays around our necks. Those are tea leaves. We both wore 3 strands of tea leaves. And when the lady who performed our ceremony, by the way, it's 333. That's how much time I have left right now. Kind of interesting. When the lady who was performing our ceremony, yeah. When the lady who was performing our ceremony told this story and told our 3 story to everybody who was there, and there was about 100 people on the beach, and about 90% of them were straight. There wasn't a dry eye to be found. We'd come so far in our 20 years together. Well, there we go. We started doing that because it was a necessity. We continued doing it because it was habit. And it gotten to a point in my life where I really wasn't fearful anymore about people knowing who I was, how I lived. I was proud of the fact that Sean and I were together. And then all of a sudden, that fear all came back to me. I was given the opportunity to take over the leadership of this brand. And I was sitting with Christian Volkers, there he is, probably one of the most distinguished and sophisticated gentlemen I've ever met. And I was sitting with Christian Volkers, and I was about to accept the assignment of becoming the CEO of this brand. And suddenly, all that fear came rushing back. And I was fearful. What if he didn't know this? What if he finds out after the fact? And in some way, what I'm doing right now by not sharing this with him, I'm sabotaging the result that I want to have. Or worse yet, all this is going to be taken away from me. All those fears. And so I stopped, dead, with pen in my hand, and said, Mr. Volkers, I have to tell you this. I'm gay, and I'm married to my husband, Sean. And he stopped, and he looked at me with this kind of confused look on his face. And my heart was beating almost as hard as it is telling the story right now. And he said, so you want to invite him to dinner? He couldn't care less. He couldn't care less, and the entire organization couldn't care less. That's the brand that I was joining. And I could tell you right then, I knew that this opportunity was going to be something special. And it was going to mean a lot for me, and it was going to be a lot of great things were going to happen. And believe me, it has not under-delivered in any way whatsoever. So I'll tell you now that next year, in June, Sean and I will celebrate 30 years together. He deserves that, not me. We'll celebrate 30 years together. And I'll also tell you, at the time we were getting married, which was 10 years ago, that's about the time the new iPhone came out, the first iPhone with the camera. And I'm not sure whether he did it or I did it, but one of us, before, after, in that general time of getting married, took a photograph of a number 3 someplace, and we texted it to the other person. That's some of these that you see up here. We've now collected thousands of those 3s from all over the world. We still send them. If you look at his phone or my phone right now, I guarantee you there are photos of 3s on it that we've taken in the last 24 hours. And it's not about the collection, even though we do post some of them on the internet. We also have this, this piece of art in our living room that's a mosaic of one giant 3 made up of all these 3s. But it's not about the collection. For me, it's about the fact that I can say that this is something that I've done with my best friend. And this 3 represents my best friend. It also represents all the incredible people that have come into our lives. It represents the journey that we've been on together. It represents what can happen when you do channel your fears into drive. It represents what happens when you focus on what's most important in life. And finally, it happens when you're authentic and you're yourself. And I'm going to do this, and I know it's corny, but I've got to do it. And I hope I can get through it, but if you'll give me just a second. Sean, where are you? There you are. Of course, there in the back. There he is. Sean, fortunately, we don't need a code anymore, especially in this room. I love you. Thank you for letting me share my story this morning. Have a good day.
Anthony Hitt. Thanks for sharing that story.
Oh, I feel so much better.
Do you? I feel better now. Wasn't even my story. So many of us come from religious backgrounds, right? Like, I was raised really strict Catholic. Not just Catholic, Filipino Catholic. Okay? All right, you're laughing because some of you know. Filipinos don't just believe in God. We believe in everything. Vampires, leprechauns, Bigfoot. The only thing we don't believe in is paying retail. We're cheap. Our next superstar. 3 words. My husband and I say those 3 words to each other every single night. Red or white. Because we're parents.